it's almost like a childlike optimism as well that you've got to have, and put your ego aside, because so many people miss learning opportunities just because they're too busy trying to, defend their intelligence and their capabilities. So I think just maintaining a childlike curiosity about people is how you take the focus away from, oh, what about me and why am I not special now, and to, oh, this person's really cool and special. Yep, so my name is Alicia. I am from Australia originally. I still hop in between. And what brought me here, well, initially a hen's party is what brought me here. But this was at a time when I was traveling, because basically I was in the midst of relocating my startup to America, actually, to Austin, Texas. But then the funding that I was relying on got pulled. So I ended up hopping around a bit for about a year. I had a lot of friends in different countries. So I would go and visit them, dump my bags on them, and then hop around. And so I initially came to Bali actually for a hen's party, and then ended up bouncing back and forth between here and Australia because I realized how much I loved it here, because it is truly what they call an entrepreneur's dream.
I got two questions. What drew you to the startup world, and what were you doing beforehand?
So I got drawn to the startup world pretty early, actually, back at university. So initially graduating school, I had the intentions to become a lawyer. So I went to Bond University in the Gold Coast on a scholarship and to study law. And then halfway through my degree, I ended up changing my mind and pursuing a startup business because I made friends who had done startup businesses before. And I was 19 at the time and didn't even realize that starting a business was a career option that you could pursue. So thankfully, I made friends. And then there was a startup accelerator program at my university where you could, for a semester, enter with an idea and go into the accelerator program and explore that idea. So I got an idea from actually my scholarship, because I was an Indigenous scholarship student at Bond. And my university had the largest private collection of Indigenous artwork at the university. So I volunteered to take external guests through that art collection. And in learning about the stories behind the artwork, because it's not like you sit at home with your Indigenous family and you talk about Indigenous artwork all the time. So I didn't realize the significance of our artwork. And that's actually where I got my first startup idea from, which I then entered into my university accelerator program and got initial funding for it, which was only $5,000, pitch competition at the end of the program. And that was my introduction into startup world.
Have you worked a 9-to-5 before, and has that helped build the skills that you've then used into your startup?
Yes, definitely. So I'm a really strong believer in the lean startup methodology. I don't like having to raise investment funding, because I think for ideas that are that you're really passionate about, and that are intended to have a social impact. So all of my ideas have been mostly social impact, and I've worked in social impact. I think control is a really important element of those types of businesses. And if you are to get investors on that, you're getting the right investors on that back that vision of social impact and aren't just in it for quick returns. So I'm a big backer of lean startup methodology and bootstrapping. So with the jobs, I've definitely had your traditional 9-to-5 jobs in periods where I ran out of money in a business, or I needed money for my business and did that alongside running the business, or gaps in between winding up a failing business, because I've definitely had failures galore, and then done a 9-to-5 and then worked on an idea whilst at the business and then left that job. So I've had probably, I would say, a handful of 9-to-5 jobs, all mostly in social impact.
And you mentioned that Bali is the entrepreneur's dream. What things in Bali, or what does Bali provide that you think makes it a paradise for entrepreneurs?
For a few reasons, because I have done a lot of travel. I've done about over 20 countries, and I still say Bali for me is my favorite. For a few reasons. The community, so there are a lot of people that are digital nomads here. They're really easy to find. But also Bali is catered for work-in, as in there's every cafe you go to almost, there will be Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi, and PowerPoints, which is really important for a digital nomad. Like even, for example, I can go to a restaurant in the jungle and sit by a pool, and I'll ask the staff, and they'll be like, "Yeah, there's a PowerPoint that you can get out of the grass," like that. Like there's always PowerPoints. There's no, and that for me is a gold mine, because in other countries it's really hard to find PowerPoints. So that to me is like a massive tick. But then also, other than that, it's of course low cost of living and just things that take up time in an average human's day, like laundry, for example. You can outsource that pretty quickly and easily, which is a godsend. And then besides that, Bali is a favorite personally for me because I like driving motorbikes. So, and Bali for me is the best place to do that. I've driven in a few countries and nothing tops Bali for me riding. So I like the chaos of Bali, even though for some people they would say that's a reason I wouldn't drive a motorbike here. But
And going back to your startup journey, so you got interested in about 19 years old? 19, 20, and you're 29 now. So over the last 10 years, you've had failures, you've had startup failures, you've had 9-to-5 jobs. What's something that you valued 10 years ago in your startup journey that no longer value as much today?
Something I thought was important to recall when I was younger. That's an interesting question. I think for me, when I was younger and would have the 9-to-5 jobs, yes, I knew getting the skills from those jobs is important. And I always knew inevitably I was going to run a business, or I was running a business at the time. So I would do a few things like steal policies and things like that from companies and go, oh, that's a nice way of managing your staff. And then like downloading that. So those are I did a bunch of that, but I would say the biggest thing is probably I did not used to value as much the people that I met in those roles, and then I thought my mindset was get in there, smash out my 9-to-5, make sure I do an average performance. I could always do better, but I wanted to save a lot of that mental willpower for my business. And sometimes people who are trying to do a business on the side, or who want to do a business, who have an idea and want to start it, sometimes I think people can really struggle to separate their identity from their job. But I found that very easy, and that I knew I personally don't care about my performance in this job. It's just a means to an end. So I could easily detach from it and do a low performance. But then in doing so, I'd also detach from the people. I didn't think there was any value in actually, networking or putting time in to get to know my colleagues. Whereas now I know the value of networking, and people have heard this 100 times, but people you meet, you never know when a use for them pops up. Not to say you should just use people, but you never know what people you end up collaborating with later. So those relationships, any relationships that you can foster, that are actually useful. And I definitely had periods where I'm looking for a job, for example, and someone that I met in a previous company, I need to make some money for my startup, goes, oh, hey, I know you were good at this. There's this opportunity. So now I know the value of actually investing in relationships.
What are some emerging trends for technologies that you're particularly excited about?
I've been in the blockchain space for years. And of course, now you've got AI. So everyone's going to say AI. But I do find it exciting because the particular app that I'm building, which was a pivot from another pivot, can really leverage that to take it to the next level. And it's exciting for small startups, I think, in particular, to hop on tech like that. Not to say you should abandon your original idea, but if it does actually naturally align with what you're building, it does represent an exciting opportunity, because larger companies often have trouble incorporating something very quickly like that. So if you can jump on and tackle a problem that is really niche, for example, and that bigger companies normally dominate the space for, you can get ahead with first movers advantage. So I think that's what I'm really excited about, is incorporating that into what I'm building and hopping on an opportunity.
How do you balance creativity and innovation? So I know you've got a lot of ideas with the practical demands of running and building a startup.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one too, because what can be dangerous for startup founders is, yes, you've got this awesome emerging tech, but often founders will just say, oh, I've just got to incorporate it then. I've got to find some way to incorporate it so that it's appealing for investors. And I think that can be a really dangerous rabbit hole, which can take you away from the original problem you set out to solve, which doesn't really need that technology. In saying that, to know whether you need that technology, you need to know about that technology. So for me, I'm definitely a person that will scroll on Reddit threads, and I'll do that in any bit of spare time that I have, before bed, for example, or in between meetings where you've only got sort of 10 minutes. You don't really have time to do substantial work, so I'll do a bunch of scroll. Yeah, Reddit. LinkedIn's another one, because a lot of people post content on there and want to be seen as, forward thinking. So they'll just do the work for you and post on LinkedIn, like Michael actually. So reading posts like that is super useful.
We'll get back to the podcast in 1 minute, but I just wanted to let you know the sponsor of this week's episode, which is me. So I've got a free 5-day email course that will help anyone with a 9-to-5 or a beginner solopreneur start and scale their business to $1,000 per month. So you can find the link in the description in this podcast episode. Click on it. It's free to sign up. You'll get 5 emails from me teaching you and walking you through how to start your one-person business and make your first $1,000 per month recurring. So I'll see you there, and thank you for listening to this episode. Can you share, you mentioned about your startup and what you're doing. Can you share a project or initiative you're currently working on that you're particularly passionate about?
Yeah, so I have a couple. One is Thirsty Turtle, which is a skincare brand I'm doing with 2 other female founders, which incorporates native Australian plants into the ingredients. And the products are catered for sensitive and sun-damaged skin. And that one I really like because we're working with First Nations farmers and trying to increase their equity in the bush foods industry, because currently less than 2% is owned by First Nations farmers, which is ironic because they should own the bush foods industry really in Australia. But most passionate about that's a sort of business that's close to my heart. And then in terms of my competitive, want to dominate in industry side, is my fintech company. So a payments processor that I'm building that facilitates real-time payments and real-time inventory data for retailers, which is designed to help facilitate real-time payment splitting to all those in the value supply chain, particularly farmers, and hoping to help a lot of farmers out in developing countries in particular with that. Because actually that's what can cause food shortages, is farmers just not being paid on time.
How do you handle fear, self-doubt, and uncertainty in your startup journey?
Everyone can have imposter syndrome for sure, particularly when, like Bali, right? A great place to meet lots of interesting people. And so it's very easy to think, that person I just met is really smart. I will never be at that level. So that's a natural part of meeting amazing people. I think the way that I get through it is to always just maintain a curiosity and a learning mindset, is to, foster an admiration for those people and just think, what's something really cool that I can learn from this person? Because that's probably why I've met them. So I think it's almost like a childlike optimism as well that you've got to have, and put your ego aside, because so many people miss learning opportunities just because they're too busy trying to, defend their intelligence and their capabilities. So I think just maintaining a childlike curiosity about people is how you take the focus away from, what about me and why am I not special now? And to, this person's really cool and special. What's something I can gain from meeting this amazing person?
But you've also taken an alternative, non-traditional route at a very young age. How did you handle the expectations or the fear of judgment from family, good friends, from people around you who may be taking more of that traditional route or what?
That's an interesting question. I think I'm just naturally optimistic to a point of failure, because 100% I've got a lot of my friends have done the traditional route, and high up in their fields, doctors, lawyers, and I don't know, for me it just wouldn't. I just know myself and know that it would feel natural for me to pursue a career like that and be happy about that. I've always wanted to have some level of autonomy in what I do. Freedom is something I really value. So I think that sort of, I guess, honoring myself and my values is a priority for me. And I think I was very lucky in the sense that I've come from a low income background of Indigenous parents, and even me going to university is a really, really big deal. And so there isn't really a lot of opinions that I had to fight against. Like, it's not like my mum was, you absolutely have to be a lawyer. She's just like, awesome that you went to university, do what you want kind of thing, because that in itself is such a big achievement for Indigenous Australians. So it's like they've always been supportive about me doing what I want. And then my friends who are doing traditional careers, if anything, I've noticed there's a big shift towards becoming really curious about what I'm doing and how they can incorporate more creativity and autonomy in what they're doing. So it's not even that what they're doing is seen as that desirable anymore. A lot of people actually admire what I'm doing. So basically, short answer, long answer, is that it's been kind of easy. It's not like I've had people chewing me out for pushing entrepreneurship, rather being admired for it.
What advice would you give someone who's just starting out on their solopreneurship, startup, digital nomad journey?
Advice I would give is to definitely adopt a learning mindset. You're not going to get everything perfect immediately. Like, there's been many times where, especially if you're traveling, so many dumb travel mistakes that you'll make that you learn from, and you're like, maybe don't let a strange man pick you up from the airport kind of thing. So basically, I would say, adopt a learning mindset. Think again with that childlike curiosity. The other thing, though, as well, is I think emotional resilience is really important, because there's definitely going to be times where, if this is your first time branching out and, controlling your schedule and, working out how much finances you have and invoicing clients, yes, you're definitely going to make mistakes, but B, it's going to be stressful because you don't have the fallback of a comfortable salary that comes, on the same day every single month to rely on. So that's going to be a bit uncomfortable at first. So developing emotional resilience and knowing how to manage your stress and anxiety will become pretty pivotal, because you can't stress out while you're on a client meeting because you're not sure whether you're going to get paid at the end of it. You need to be able to talk to that client with a stable, confident voice, and have that client feel that you're a competent person. Because if you like your crack show, you're stressing about whether you're actually going to get the invoice you need to pay for your next flight to the next country, then you may be in hot water there. So emotional resilience becomes your friend. Learning self-management is everything, basically.
This might relate to what I'm about to ask next, but what advice would you give to your 21-year-old self?
That's an interesting question. So at 21, I was essentially getting ready to graduate. I was only really a C student because the only class I actually got a really, really high grade in university was actually the Entrepreneurship Accelerator Program one. So I actually really cared about that. The others, I learnt pretty quickly to just detach, and I was always doing multiple things while studying law at the same time. So, and that's because, I didn't really care. I didn't want to care about getting high grades because I wasn't trying to become a lawyer. So by 21, I was about to graduate and was working on my startup at the time. And the advice I would have given myself back then was to get a consistent mentor who checks in with your progress. Because when you're 21, you're a bit naive and you think like you have the capacity to manage yourself entirely. But there's so many just dumb, obvious things that I did where if I had a regular mentor check-in, that person could have set me right and been like, hey, to let you know that thing you did was pretty stupid. Why are you doing that? Like, your brain's not really fully developed by then. Your prefrontal lobe has not set in. So I would have said, yeah, you're smart, sure, you're ambitious, you're doing okay, but you could have been doing better if you had a regular mentor that you could check in who knew everything about your business, but also everything about you as well, and your personal characteristics and tendencies and things like that.
One of the last questions I ask in these interviews is for people who have grown up in one country, maybe moved to another to live in, and then traveled around the world, is how do you form a sense of identity, connection, and belonging?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question too. All these questions are just amazing. On that one's actually pretty funny because so based on I have a bunch of different backgrounds ethnically. Like for example, I've got six easily. Dad is Sri Lankan, Aboriginal, and a bit of British. We found out recently, and then my mum is Torres Strait Islander, Malaysian, and a little bit of Filipino actually. And the funniest thing is that when I go, my ethnicity changes depending on what country I go to. So, for example, Indonesia, they don't believe that I'm Australian at all. So I'm Indonesian, and then I'll go to Malaysia, and I'm Malaysian. I do have Malaysian, to be fair, but a little bit. And then I'll go to the Philippines, and suddenly I could be Filipino as well. I'll go to Europe, and I'm European African. So your identity can become a bit warped. Your cultural identity, definitely. I think how I try to maintain it is just probably keeping up communication with family, and that when I go back to my home country, to Australia, that I spend time with family, because it is very easy to put your entire cultural and ethnic identity to the side when traveling, because you meet people from all over the world, some of whom have never met someone from your culture before, and it's almost like they'll assign you in a cultural and ethnic identity, and it honestly just becomes easier sometimes to be like, yeah, that's what I am, so I'm just gonna not fight it, and right now I'm Indonesian. Yeah, so
Do you think you find or create your identity?
that's an interesting one. Personal experience, I think you find it. I think that growing up in the home with your family, certainly they're the first people that will give you your identity. But I think that as you meet new people, particularly as you travel to new places and experience new cultures, and the thing I love about travel is that it's almost like you unlock different parts of yourself. Like, for example, pre-Philippines and pre-Bali, I'd never touched a motorbike in my life, or even knew that I liked that, or that I was a huge adrenaline junkie. That wasn't part of my life. And now I know, like, that's my favorite thing, honestly. Like, if you took that away, I will never be happy again, basically. But again, it's like the different countries and different experiences that happened in those countries unlocked that part of me. And it's something now that I bring back when I do go back to my home country. I've literally had friends tell me, you're so different now. Like, who you are now is definitely not who you were when I met you in university, which can be jarring for people. But that is why I think that particularly whilst traveling, you will find your identity, or your current identity will, at least there'll be different elements added to it that weren't there before.
And the last question is there any message you want to leave with the audience?
Yes, actually, the biggest thing I think that held people back, and because I've had these discussions with a lot of people, particularly those that are in corporate careers and high up in their careers, is a lot of people don't do it because of fear. That seems to be the number one reason. Because often I would have older people come up to me and say, "Wow, you're so admirable. You're so inspiring." And I'm like, "Why? I'm just doing this, and I'm bumbling my way through it. Like, I make so many mistakes. It's insane. I could write a guidebook on like dumb stuff you just shouldn't do." But they would be like, "Yeah, but the point is that you're doing it. Whereas I want to do it, but I'm scared to make that leap." So I think the biggest the most impactful advice I would give is to do it even if you're scared. And actually, that fear is a good thing. And it's better to be to learn from your mistakes rather than to never have made them at all and to remain in your comfort zone. People don't die happy in their comfort zone. Actually, my favorite quote is, and I'm probably going to butcher the quote as well. But most people, they say something like, most people die.
You die at 25, but I'm very interested.
That's it. Most people die at die at 25, but and not buried until 70, and that's very, very true. So that's what I would leave people with: is do it even if you're scared. You will not regret it.
Hello, friends, and thank you again for listening to this week's episode of the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard and got value from the podcast, I would love for you to share it with a friend who also wants to start, grow, and scale their solopreneur business or on their own one-person business journey. And if you could like and subscribe, that would be amazing. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Bye.